It's interesting how, as the feminists of the 1970s have grown into their dotage, they have come out and started saying things like, we were lying to women. We were literally making it up. They couldn't have it all. And actually, maybe abortion is something we feel a bit guilty about. Really interesting how that took so long, isn't it?
Well, I suppose they grew up.
Yes, they grew old. That was the thing. They grew old and they looked back on their lives and they said, hang on a second, that was bad. So this is an article on the Daily Signal where they interviewed Sue Ellen Browder, who was a Cosmopolitan magazine writer for 20 years back in the 70s, beginning in the 70s, and describes what she wrote as, quote, propaganda. The goal was to sell women on the idea that sexual liberation is the path to a single woman's personal fulfillment. Didn't happen. Just didn't happen. She says propaganda is very sophisticated. It's half-truth, selected truth, and truth out of context. Propaganda is not just used to sell products, it's also used to sell ideas. This was a conscious decision that they made. They knew what they were doing, as she goes on to say. The year was 1969, and getting fired for being pregnant was a wake-up call. And just to be clear, I'm not saying things were perfect for women in 1969 or anything. Being fired for being pregnant, not really something we should be doing. If you get pregnant, Callum, I'll tell you.
I'll try not to.
Yeah, good. Women could not apply for credit in their own name. There were help wanted ads, help wanted male, help wanted female. Women couldn't go on to law school or medical school in some cases. There was a lot of discrimination going on, and that's why in the late 60s and early 70s, so many women of my generation identified with the feminist movement. So it's not to say there weren't real issues of injustice or unwarranted discrimination or things like that. There were in the 60s. But we are not in the 60s now. We are like 60 years on from that. And these old women are now like, didn't go well. The feminist movement was fighting for equal opportunity for women in education and the workforce. The sexual revolution, on the other hand, was fighting for all sorts of sexual freedoms. So how did the two become intertwined? In part, Browder says, through the propaganda she wrote. So she's making it clear that wanting equal rights is not the same as the sexual revolution. But she
purposely conflated them.
Exactly. So in 1971, Browder worked under the legendary Helen Gurley Brown, who was Cosmopolitan's editor-in-chief for more than 30 years and the author of the best-selling 1962 book, Sex and the Single Girl. Taking cues from Playboy magazine, yes, that's the thing, that's the place you'd look to for inspiration, Playboy, Brown turned the struggling magazine into an international empire. She gave her writers a printed list of rules to follow, which included instructions about how to make up parts of their stories to sound more convincing. Deliberate lies.
Hang on, but also, who's reading the articles in Playboy? I thought that was a joke. Like, yeah, I bought it for the articles.
I've never bought an issue of Playboy. So, I don't know. But the point is, Brown literally had them lie. Just make it up. Make it sound more convincing. Tell them untruths about abortion, about sexual liberation, about all of these things. And that is how they turned their magazine into an international empire. Browder details the story of how a small group of feminists inserted abortion into the agenda of the women's movement in her 2015 book, Subverted: How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. Just coming out and saying it. Hey,
I'm glad we have an admission at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice to have.
Women, this is what they did to you, right? She documents the disgust of many pro-life feminists, but from that point on, the narrative was set. Essentially, she says, all women want this, and that's how the propaganda works. So, lies. Feminism has never been a majority position for women, ever, right? Suffrage wasn't
a large minority.
Exactly. Suffrage wasn't a majority position. This kind of feminism wasn't a majority position. And of course, abortion on demand is not a majority position. And yet, here we are, right?
I mean, the modern inclination, the polling, what is it, 8%?
Something like that, yeah.
The British women describe themselves as feminists?
Yeah. I mean, most of them were for women's rights. You know, for the 89% were like, well, I want men and women to be able to have the same job opportunities.
And that's why I don't want feminism.
And that's why I don't, exactly. And who doesn't agree with that? You know, of course, if a woman wants to apply for a job, she should be allowed to apply for a job. What, no one cares, right? But anyway, more lies. So the irony of all of this, right? She's like, oh, you can be a single successful woman who has sex with different men every night and you can have it all. While she was married and living a traditional lifestyle, she was married with 2 kids. She wasn't practicing what she preached. So she was literally getting paid to lie to women to ruin their lives and futures, right? But she says that she too was corrupted by the influence of Cosmopolitan and these views that she was espousing. At 27-year-old, she was happily married with 2 children at home, and then she became pregnant with a third, and she and her husband decided to get an abortion. It was 1974, the year after Roe v. Wade, which how she was able to do it. She had the abortion in the same hospital where she previously gave birth. She says, "I did not realize what a traumatic experience that would be later in my life, how much that would haunt me." About 20 years later, in 1994, in her last piece in Cosmopolitan, she did her last piece in Cosmopolitan. 10 years after that, she converted to Catholicism and sought the help of the church to heal her from her abortion. You did this to yourself, and you did it to loads of other women as well. When you start betraying the truth, she says, it will come back to haunt you. It will get you in the end, and that's why even though I knew we were making up stories, I still got sucked in and thought abortion would be okay. She says, we were making up stories. It persuaded me, the stories I made up persuaded me abortion was okay and I'd be fine with it, and now I'm a devout Catholic desperately trying to seek salvation for the life I took. That's what she's saying. Just openly, right? Anyway, she says, I don't want to take more credit than I deserve for all of this evil, but I think that I was certainly part of the evil empire, if you will. And that what I would like is for young women today is to tell them the truth so that they could see how my generation got it wrong, why we got it wrong, and how they can do better, how your generation can do better. There is such a thing as pro-life feminism. In fact, pro-life feminism is the authentic feminism of the 21st century, the true communism, basically. But what she's saying is that women's equal rights in the workplace and under law, that's what feminism is supposed to be. Sure. The sexual liberation movement is not what feminism is supposed to be. Sure.
I suppose
Split them apart.
The textbooks would describe the initial position as liberal feminism before they then describe radical feminism and Marxist feminism like crap. And that's the position of equal rights under the law and all these societal stuff. Well, that's a different conversation, isn't it?
Yes. And so why did this hijacking of the women's movement happen? Well, the answer is, of course, money. That's why. Obviously. Why was Cosmo so successful? Because it attracted advertisers. Why did it attract advertisers? Because it worked. Yeah, lying to people works. You know, they want to believe things, and if you tell them the things they want to believe, even if they're not true, then they'll buy it. And she herself bought it. Her own lies she bought. When a young woman, an insecure young woman, reads these magazines and thinks that she has to have perfume, cosmetics, hair products, beautiful clothes, singles, travel, abortions, contraceptions, when she thinks she has to have all of these things, she's going to spend a lot of money. Which is ironic because that shows that feminism is capitalist exploitation.
Of women.
Of women. That ruins their lives and their emotional sense of themselves.
Which modern feminists then try to cope and be like, yeah, this is the pink tax and men did this to us.
Yeah.
So, I don't think so.
No, this is all done by women to women for the purpose of profit. Yeah. She's now 74 and she giggles at the ridiculousness of the ideas that she once told women were the secret to success and happiness. But then she turns serious, reflecting on the damage she's done and the damage such magazines and websites continue to do. Jezebel.com are feeling personally attacked at this point. Now there's the other side of it. I say we're all liberated. Are we? You know, on one hand, yes, we can go to college, we can get a degree, we can be doctors, lawyers, and engineers, we can do all this stuff, we can make more money. But does that make women happy? No, not really, but we'll get to that in a minute. So there was another feminist, very old at this point, in 2017, did an interview with Newsnight, and she basically regrets feminism as an old lady. Let's play this clip.
If you're young, healthy, energetic, have a career, it's wonderful to go out to work, but most women have jobs or end up with jobs, not careers, often because they've had children. The social change in the last 40 years has been enormous, thanks to feminism in a way. But you can't say, oh, it's all wonderful, because the original feminists really didn't think about the children. And we saw a world of young, healthy, intelligent, striving women, and we didn't really honestly take much notice of those who were not like us.
But you seem to be suggesting broadly that feminism hasn't turned out as well as you thought it would when you were younger?
No, it hasn't. I mean, there are many, many advantages. Earning a living gives women economic independence, which means that they have freedom, they have power, they have all these things, but they have no rest, and they look tired, and they look exhausted, and I mean, I don't think feminism is wonderful for any woman under 30.
There we go.
So I was laughing because I can't get over corporate press mouthpieces, like interviewers like that. But like,
Emily
are you
Maitlis.
blaspheming?
Yeah.
You know, it's like Kathy Newman.
Yeah. But feminism is wonderful for any woman under 30. So if you're a young, 20-something, attractive, healthy woman, feminism is great for you because then you get to essentially abuse your power in society. But for any woman who's getting older and so less interesting by men, getting a bit tired because she's working all of the hours of the day for corporate masters, again, capitalist exploitation, you could frame it if you were a left-winger, it's not good for you. And this is what the old feminists are saying, the people who have been there and lived this. And it's not surprising that there is famously a 2008 paper from Yale Law School called The Paradox of Declining Female Happiness, where, and I'm just going to read you out the abstract of this, because this is just, you get what you deserve, really. By many objective measures, the lives of women in the United States have improved over the past 35 years, and yet we show measures of subjective well-being that indicate women's happiness has declined both absolutely and relative to men. Lying feminists exploited you, and they are ruining your personal happiness by promoting all of this feminist bollocks. That's what they're saying. The paradox of women's declining relative well-being is found across various data sets, measures of subjective well-being, and is pervasive across demographic groups and in industrialized countries. So everywhere in the industrialized West, women are less happy than their mothers and grandmothers were. Why? Why is that? Because you were taken advantage of.
Relatively also less happy than men.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Men are more happy than women.
Of the same era.
And it used to be that the men were less happy than the women, and now it's like, sorry, you know, we didn't get taken advantage of by the feminists. It was you. You got taken advantage of. So the relative declines in female happiness have eroded a gender gap in happiness, which women in the 70s typically reported higher subjective well-being than did men. So under patriarchy, women were happy. Freedom, women are not happy. Basically what they're saying here. These declines have continued, and a new gender gap is emerging, one with higher subjective well-being for men. Well, too bad. Not my problem.
That could be the response.
Yeah, I know.
Just like, yeah, we're
just
men.
memeing,
What do I need to
obviously.
care? But...
yeah. Obviously, I have women in my life whose happiness I care about. And so, yes, this is something that concerns me. In 2013, this was a big cope. Psychology Today were like, we've got to deal with this 5-year-old study that shows that women aren't happy. And what can we do? Well, cope, right? While it appears that although women's happiness levels have been on the decline for decades, women also possess very specific strengths that, when leveraged, promote not only happiness, but resilience. So cope. Cope with it, women. That's what they're saying. Women have strengths, so you stop being happy and just be successful. But I want to be happy. I want to like my life. I don't want to have to cope over this.
Yes, but you could have bigger numbers.
Exactly. Anyway, in 2018, The Guardian published an interesting article about a study that was made. So there's apparently a sharp decline in women's happiness among girls and young women in the UK, with the majority of them blaming exams and social media for causing the stress. So it's not like it's just like this one thing that's caused the decline. There are other things, modern things, that weren't affecting women in the 60s and 70s that are now piling on the pressures that are on women and young girls.
Exams aren't new, though. The social media is.
Anyway, 1 in 4 girls and young women between the ages of 7 and 21 describe themselves as very happy. And the latest attitude survey for the Girl Guiding Organization, and in 2009 that was 41%. So a notable and measurable decline in the number of women who describe themselves as very happy. The oldest were the least happy. More than a quarter of young women aged 17 to 21 said they did not feel happy, up 11% in 2009. So not exactly a good trend, right? Their unhappiness in turn affected their confidence, health, and relationships and studies. While 7 out of 10 girls identified school exams as the key cause of stress, pressure from social media was blamed by 6 out of 10 girls, and increasing numbers said they experienced unkind, threatening, and negative behavior online compared to 5 years ago. From who, I wonder? Right now, my own experience with my 12-year-old daughter using WhatsApp is women are cruel to each other. In all stages of their lives. Everywhere. And so, yeah. this is obviously compounded with the COVID crisis. And so I couldn't find this, right? So if we go to the next one, right, I had to find reporting in the New Indian Express because this wasn't reported in the West, basically. But this is a series of Western studies, I think it was. But a study found that COVID-19 pandemic, women, especially mothers, spent more time on tasks such as childcare and household chores than men. And in turn, this time spent completing household chores is linked to lower well-being and decreased happiness during the pandemic. So women's happiness has got all of these things piling on top of it for various different reasons. And it's just plummeting through the floor. Mad. Absolutely mad. And everyone's saying, oh yeah, well, we're feminists, we're progressives, we're fighting for women's liberation or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, but is that what women actually want?
But they're also not, because now they've just come out and said, yeah, we effed up.
Yeah.
We effed up big time.
Yeah. The older feminists are like, yeah, we were lying to you. We actively knew we were lying. This wasn't good for you.
Well, the old lady there who advocated feminism didn't say she was lying, but she also...
Not her, the other one.
I understand. But the other one, the older lady, she did say at least, well, in our perspective, we didn't take account anyone who wasn't us.
Yep.
Like,
we
for
were
us, this was
incredibly
fantastic.
selfish, myopic. We didn't consider the future. We didn't consider that people grow older, and as women grow older, if they aren't in a secure family system where they have a husband and children and then, grandchildren as they get older, they become left over. They become lonely. And nobody is interested in them. Nobody's concerned about them. It's like, sorry.
I mean, the Chinese term, particularly brutal, what is it, leftover women?
Yeah. And this is what the West is now facing. Generations of leftover women. And the feminists who created these leftover women, like, not good. Not good. Either we were selfish and didn't think about it, or we were actively lying to you. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 p.m. UK time on lotuseaters.com.